has to do against Joe, and it's just about whether or not Joe can maybe surprise him with a different game plan approach to how he expects Joe to come at him, but Joe actually approaches it a little bit differently, and that might be enough to kind of turn the tables. But both very accomplished players. Going to be an absolute incredible game for us to kick off our top 4 coverage.
It certainly will be. I hope you guys are at least half as excited as we are here in Frankfurt to get into these top 4 matches. These are 2 of the best players in the world. Being able to showcase their excellent skill and amazing Pokemon play is certainly an educational moment for everyone at home and for us here as well behind the desk.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at the 2 teams as well. You've got the classic Sun Rinya team that Eric's playing, but Joe does have the Sun mode at his disposal as well. He does have the Venusaur, whereas Eric's got the Charizard. And then you have to look at Joe's team. What's his answer for the Charizard? Because you've got to expect Eric to really take advantage of the Charizard in this match. You've got to think, well, Joe has got the Regieleki, so he's got to play that well and protect it. But there's double ground on Eric's side of the field, which makes it a bit difficult, So it's a very, very tough match to call. Right
it certainly is. They have really good counters to so many different mechanics on the opposing team. But let's jump into this very first top 4 match of the Masters Division here in Frankfurt. It's going to be for Joe, the Regieleki and the Incineroar diving out into the action with an Incineroar of Eric's very own paired up with that Grimmsnarl. So Regieleki once again happy to be here and applying a lot of formidable pressure with something like a Max Lightning. But as you mentioned there, Lee, there might be a ground type hiding in the back.
There could be a ground type, and that's always the risk, You could take the play where you match the Regieleki here and try and target down that Grimmsnarl, fake out into try and stop those screens. But the risk is always going to be if that Grimmsnarl retreats and maybe a Groudon hits the field or even a Gastrodon hits the field. Probably unlikely that we see the Gastrodon in this matchup just because of the Venusaur inclusion on Joe's side of the field, but you can't discount it, and there is always a possibility of 2 ground types popping up.
Well, the ground type has joined the field, but it's actually for Joe's side. The Groudon's going to switch in for that Regieleki, allowing Regieleki to play a little bit later on in the match. Fake out from one Incineroar, going into the other. Eric seeming to be the faster here. As we see the items switch around as Groudon gets an Iron Ball and Grimmsnarl now gets the Assault Vest. An interesting item choice on that Grimmsnarl. Might be a little bit difficult for it to now go for those status moves, but certainly is going to slow down that Groudon.
Yeah, it will really slow down the Groudon. The problem is with the Grimmsnarl getting the Assault Vest is it's not going to be able to really utilize any of its kind of support options at all now because of that Assault Vest that it's just obtained. So it can't use Trick again, can't get rid of the Assault Vest, and if it has got access to screens at all, it's not going to be able to make use of those either.
Exactly, and the parting shot coming in as well, going to be reducing the attack and special attack of that opposing Groudon, but obviously it's the attack stat that is critical, just going to be kind of weakening the offensive pressure that this Groudon has, and Groudon's certainly having a tough time so far in this game 1. Its speed has been heavily reduced by that Iron Ball, and it's not going to have as well the special defense boost it got from that Assault Vest. Charizard joining the fray as Incineroar goes for a parting shot from Joe into the Charizard that's just come in, going to be lowering the special attack and just helping Joe not have that offensive pressure from the Charizard, as well as giving Joe the opportunity to make a switch of his own. Knowing that the Charizard's now in play, Joe's going to want to make sure to have a Pokemon in there who's going to be able to capitalize on the sun in the sky, such as the Venusaur, but certainly risky when Charizard could go for something like a Max Airstream or Max Flare. Venusaur as well going to have its special attack dropped by that Spirit Break, so both of these Pokemon switching in, the Charizard and the Venusaur, and having it reduced, but Grimmsnarl avoiding the Stone Edge. I was wondering if that was going into the Charizard then, Lee.
That would have been a huge play if it went into the Charizard. The Grimmsnarl very fortunate there that it did dodge that attack from the Groudon. Very unfortunate there for Joe, but now we see the Venusaur hit the field, and with the sun up on the field, its chlorophyll ability active. It's going to have that +2 speed. It's going to have maybe access to something like Sleep Powder, which can be hit onto the Charizard and really shut that Charizard down. The parting shot's nice onto it as well because it is going to slow down. It's not going to be as offensive as it would have been otherwise with the sun in effect.
Exactly, and Eric switching in the Incineroar to once again give Groudon a hard time throwing down that Intimidate. But Groudon's actually like, you know what, I've had enough of my stats being reduced. Let me get out and bring Regieleki back into the fray. Again, a Pokemon that's going to apply a lot of pressure to that Charizard, help out the Venusaur from having to worry about anything coming in its direction. But it looks like Eric is actually going to be going straight for the Dynamax here. First Dynamax of this top 4 here, and it's going to be the Charizard. So despite having taken the special attack drop previously, Charizard still, I mean, it's got solar power. it's in the sun, and you can set up that residual damage. So there is still a really good trade-off for Dynamaxing this particular Pokemon. Venusaur, however, does go for the Sleep Powder, connects it down onto the Charizard. So even though it has Dynamax, unless it's got a way to wake up, it's not going to be able to utilize the max moves. That's one down, but it is its first turn of guaranteed sleep.
Yeah, guaranteed sleep. And, you know, watching that Sleep Powder connect, you're thinking, is there a berry there? Is there a berry? No berry there, so we know it's not a Lum or a Chester berry on the Charizard, in a really nice position for Joe to put himself into, because otherwise, if that Sleep Powder missed, Charizard got its attack off, something is going down, and Joe's down a Pokemon. But now with the Regieleki on the field, there's no fake out in play from Eric's side of the field, and the Charizard in a really awkward position now, does not want to take any attacks from this Regieleki. But the Regieleki has to be careful as well, because the Incineroar is under Sun. It can do a lot of damage in return.
And I think as well, if you're Joe, you have to look. We've seen 3 of Eric's Pokemon. Only 1 restricted is in the back. You can't bring both of them. So if you're Joe, you need to maybe think, is it the Groudon? Is it the Zacian? And start planning forward to make sure that you have those counters towards the end game. Joe decides to also go for the Dynamax here, and it's going to be the wonderful Regieleki. I mean, this is a great opportunity. Charizard's taking a little bit of a nap. Regieleki could go for those powerful Max Lightnings, either try and pick up the KO against the Charizard, or alternatively can try and remove this Incineroar to help Venusaur out a little bit more as well. Venusaur, however, is like, hey, Lou, I don't need help. I've got my own Sleep Powder. I can take care of myself, and is putting the Incineroar to sleep. So both of Eric's Pokemon maybe a little bit tired in this top 4. As the Max Lightning comes down onto the Charizard, destructive damage, removes it from play, and Eric loses his Dynamax Pokemon without being able to utilize a single Max move.
Yeah, that's a huge play there for Joe, taking out the Charizard. It's one of the big hitters. We identified it before coming into the match as one of the tools that Eric really could take advantage of against Joe's team. But this Venusaur here really playing off that Sun that's on the field now with that Chlorophyll ability, and really being on point with these Sleep Powders, hitting these targets, making sure that they're not moving. Not a problem for Joe to kind of hopefully try and close this game out. The match isn't over by any means, but it does make it very difficult when you've just lost your Dynamax Pokemon, Gigantamax Pokemon, and you've got another Pokemon asleep still on the field.
Well, I mean, Regieleki's going to have a really hard time in front of this Groudon, so I was going to say I wouldn't be surprised to see a switch here, because you can't go for the Sleep Powders in the electric terrain. That's the one issue here. So you can't just go, hey, Venusaur, put this Groudon to sleep. So bringing in the Incineroar to go for that Intimidate is just going to help that Regieleki out in case there is a Precipice Blades coming in that direction. A switch as well for Eric, going to be bringing in the Grimmsnarl as the Regieleki goes for another Max Lightning, this time boosted up as well by that electric terrain into the Grimmsnarl. But thanks to the Assault Vest that it got earlier from the Groudon, it's going to be able to survive that attack.
Yeah, it's a nice switch, just to preserve that Intimidate for later on if you do need it, because we know that Joe's got that Groudon of his own in the back, so having that Intimidate to kind of help out against that in the late game is really going to pay off. We do see the Precipice Blades come out and the Shucker Berry activate on that Incineroar, so not taking too much damage, but now with the active Fake Out next to the Regieleki, doesn't really have to worry about that Groudon for this next turn.
Very true. Groudon, however, is just going to switch out, doesn't want to have to take any unnecessary damage, but I think critically as well, getting the Fake Out onto Eric's side going into this next turn will be really nice for him, just to be able to gain that momentum a little bit and ball positioning. But Incineroar is taking a nap, so that's always going to be a little bit problematic. Incineroar is going to go for the Fake Out from Joe down into the Incineroar that has just switched in, as Regieleki goes for another Max Lightning, finding its target again on that Grimmsnarl and just removing it from the battlefield, so Eric can no longer utilize that Pokemon. But I think, considering it got the Assault Vest on it earlier, it's not going to be in the best position to help Eric out anyway.
No, I agree there. I think the problem is now that you would normally have if you were Eric, you'd have your own Incineroar on the field and you'd have that active Fake Out to take advantage of now, but with that Incineroar asleep, it's not going to have the option to do that. And you know that Joe's got the Venusaur in the back to come in, and as long as that Incineroar isn't active, you've got a good way to come in and not only disrupt potentially the Groudon with a Sleep Powder, but you can also hit it for super effective moves with those grass type attacks.
That's really true, and there is the Venusaur coming back in for Joe. I mean, yes, the Regieleki cannot affect the Groudon. Ooh, a little bit of an interesting move choice on there, because they only have the 2 Pokemon, but either way, the Precipice Blade is going to come down and get rid of that Regieleki. Possibly meant to be targeting into that Incineroar, which is still taking a nap. It's blissfully unaware of what is happening currently on the field.
Yeah, just if you are Eric, you are wanting that Incineroar to wake up as soon as possible to try and remove that Venusaur, that sleep threat. But the problem is with Eric's Groudon, if it is the Assault Vest variant, then it has no means of protection here. You know, Joe's in a position where he can just go for the fake out into the Groudon and Sleep Powder into that slot, or he could go for the fake out into the Incineroar, expecting maybe a wake up just to give that protection for the Venusaur, and go for the Sleep Powder again into the Groudon.
Yeah, only issue is that electric terrain is going to get in the way, but it's only there for one more turn, so then Venusaur has the capability to start throwing that sleep all around. Incineroar is going to switch out again, however, and bring that Groudon, the Wish Granter, onto the field here. Again, Groudon can apply some great pressure onto that Incineroar, and Incineroar needs to get off the field at this point. Venusaur's like, I've got Groudon covered, I'm going to go for a powerful Leaf Storm, really reduce the damage so that the Groudon from Joe's side can go for something like a Precipice Blades in the next turn and try and pick up a double KO. Groudon on Eric's side going to be able to connect with its Precipice Blades as Incineroar wakes up to rejoin the party here, going for this Flare Blitz and targeting down into that opposing Venusaur. And although it does get the KO, it's obviously going to take a little bit of damage in recoil as well, putting it in a really precarious situation going forward.
Yeah, and obviously forgetting about the electric train there, the Sleep Powder was not an option, so nice recovery there for myself, Lou. But like you say, that the Incineroar waking up there for Eric is ideal, because you do remove that sleep threat now as soon as that electric train is off the field. So good time in wake up, but Joe's in a great position. He's brought back in the Incineroar, he's got that active fake out, and his Groudon's in a pretty good position here to just launch off a Precipice Blades and be very close to picking up a knockout on Eric's Groudon, and you know, it might be able to get the Incineroar on Eric's side of the field as well, but it'll be very close nonetheless as we see the fake out come out into the Groudon, just preventing any attacks from that side of the field here.
Yeah, the Incineroar able to go for a parting shot, though, from Eric here, just reducing the attack stat on that Groudon. You know, there's no opportunity to go for any Intimidates anymore. Precipice Blades comes out from Joe's Groudon, activating that Sugar Berry on the Incineroar. Able to connect on both Pokemon, but thanks to that parting shot, not going to be able to pick up the KO against the Groudon, and also with the Sugar Berry helping out Incineroar. But you can just see the HP really dwindling down on Eric's side of the field, whereas Joe is still sitting pretty healthy in the green on both remaining Pokemon. Yeah,
then the Iron Ball really playing into effect here, allowing the Incineroar to get these parting shots off before it can attack.
Yeah, the Precipice Blades then avoiding on the opposing Incineroar, as the Incineroar also wants to follow up with a Flare Blitz into the opposing Groudon. So Eric looking to have the speed advantage at this point in the match, but not quite the accuracy with those Precipice Blades. Flare Blitz will be able to pick up the KO against the Groudon on Eric's side, and considering that a Groudon is still very healthy on Joe's side, the Incineroar for Eric isn't going to be in a happy place, particularly when this Groudon can find the single target connection to take game one for Joe.
Yeah, huge win here for Joe, and you can see that how powerful the Sleep Powder was in that match, just really shutting down the options for Eric, and kind of revealing as well that he's not really got any way to get around the Sleep Powder threat, especially on the Charizard, if that is something that he's going to use. So it's going to be something that he has to keep in mind going into the game too.
Exactly, and again, the Sleep Powder was a really nice play there from Joe, just being able to kind of reduce the offensive pressure that Eric was going for. And also, even if electric terrain comes into the field, that's not going to help out the Charizard from Eric's perspective. So regardless of what happens, Charizard is always going to be vulnerable when the sun is up to Venusaur being able to go for that real quick Sleep Powder. And you could see, unfortunately for Eric, the Gigantamax with the Charizard just didn't pay off. It was kind of a wasted moment there where he just wasn't able to capitalize on it because his Pokemon was asleep, and then Regieleki wanted to just remove it from the field.
Yeah, and it's kind of risky bringing the Venusaur, because you know, it's not the 100% accurate move, the Sleep Powder. So if it does miss, you know, that could really cost you. But it's worth the risk, because the kind of payoff for hitting and shutting down Charizard is so worthwhile. And Joe played it really nicely to get his Regieleki into a position at the right time after putting it to sleep to Dynamax, and then just remove it from play and just take that whole Charizard equation away from the battle.
Exactly. We talked about that a little bit in Team Preview about this Charizard versus Venusaur, because Venusaur, like you said, with the Sleep Powder, it can determine a game. If you're able to connect with it, you can shut down your opponent, but at the same time, if you miss, that can just completely tilt the game into your opponent's favor, and there may be no comeback that you're able to make in order to get a win condition. But at the same time, the Venusaur, if it's in a position where Charizard's able to fire off something like a Max Airstream or something like a Max Flare, it's just going to be removed from the field. But the fact that both players have Sun means that Venusaur actually has a very high chance to be in an environment where that Chlorophyll ability can be activated to keep its speed nice and healthy.
Yeah, and it's interesting that with Joe's kind of tactic into this match is bringing his Sun match, his Sun kind of core to this kind of Sun match, and he's utilizing the Sun brought by Eric with his Venusaur, maybe is that something that Eric's going to kind of keep in mind. Maybe let's not try and bring the Sun to the field to give Joe that advantage with the Venusaur going forward.
I mean, another thing, just as testament of skill to these two players, both of them only brought one of their restricteds in that particular match, and it's kind of a throwback to what Wolf was saying earlier, that sometimes that's what you need to do and really capitalize on the other 5 Pokemon in your team. Joe is leading out here in game 2 with the Incineroar and the Regieleki, whereas Incineroar and Grimmsnarl are coming out for Eric.
Yeah, and we saw the exact same leads in game 1, and I think you've got to be aware that the Grimmsnarl has got access to that trick, and obviously you can see the kind of the idea behind it, trying to get that onto the Regieleki with the Iron Ball, and then it's not the big threat for the Charizard anymore. You can deal with it a lot easier. You're going to be able to potentially hit it before it actually can attack and be that threat that it was in game 1, because it was the kind of the catalyst that started the domino effect to allow Joseph to kind of close this game up.
Well, fake out from Eric's Incineroar going into the opposing Incineroar, as Grimmsnarl this time is able to go for a light screen, boosting up the special defense on Eric's side of the field. Regieleki goes for a Thunderbolt, no Dynamax here, but just getting just about a third of damage onto the opposing Grimmsnarl. And I think you're right there, Lee. In game 1, Grimmsnarl going for the trick, really, really cool, but getting the Assault Vest just, I don't think was the benefit it needed.
No, and Eric wasn't able to get his screen support up at that stage, which made it a lot more difficult for him to kind of execute his game plan. Now able to get that light screen up, maybe thinking, right, let's get my screens up, and then I'll have that trick if I need it at any point going forward after that.
Regieleki taking a defensive approach and just going for a protect, as Grimmsnarl goes for the second screen, setting up that reflects. The defense is really strong for Eric Rios very early on here. Incineroar going to go for the parting shot, but to no avail as it lands into the protect. But the Incineroar on Joe's side, no protects on Eric's side, so can go for that parting shot into the opposing Incineroar and allow Joe an opportunity to switch up the ball position. Yeah,
and it's a nice play here from Joe just to protect that Regieleki, just in case the trick did come out there, just to make sure that you weren't getting that Iron Ball. It's a nice play, and it also just protects the Regieleki and gives you the opportunity to stop the Incineroar on Eric's side of the field, getting that parting shot and letting him get maybe the Charizard onto the field, whereas Joe's now able to get the Groudon here. He's got the Incineroar on the back that he can switch in now for the Regieleki to avoid potentially that Iron Ball coming onto that slot. The Dark typing obviously immune to the Prankster, so it's a nice way for him to slow things down, to get through and try and stall out these screens that have been set up on Eric's side of the field.
And there we go, the Incineroar with its Dark type does jump in for the Regieleki, ready to try and block a potential trick as Grimmsnarl does go for it, and of course it will not affect the opposing Incineroar. An excellent switch there from Joe. Precipice Blades will come out from Joe's Groudon that's managed to get itself onto the field unintimidated, so despite the Sugar Berry, still going to deal a decent chunk to that Incineroar while chipping away at that Grimmsnarl as well. Incineroar able to go for the parting shot this time, reducing the attack of that Groudon as well as the special attack, but it doesn't matter about that, just making it slightly less of a threat with those Precipice Blades.
Yeah, and you've got to think that maybe here's the time to try and get that Charizard onto the field. There's no Venusaur out for Joe. There is no Regieleki on the field now, and it feels like a great time to get the Charizard on the field, get it where it's not at any risk of being put to sleep, and try and get that G-Max attack off to start throwing damage down on Joe's side of the field.
I completely agree. Charizard in a great position to go for something like a Gigantamax here, and you can either go for setting up that G-Max Wildfire, or you can start trying to build up that momentum with the speed, because in all likeliness there could be that Venusaur hiding out in the back for Joe, and if that comes in during the sun, then you're going to have an issue dealing with it speed-wise. So possibly could be going for some max airstreams with this Charizard. Incineroar going to come in though for Eric, just going to throw another Intimidate down against that Incineroar and also onto the Groudon, just to weaken the offensive pressure that they might have against this Charizard, which Eric is now Gigantamaxing.
Yeah, and this big attack coming out is going to hurt whatever it hits on Joe's side of the field. And this switch to the Incineroar is really nice as well, just to kind of bolster that reflect that you've already got up on the field, just to get that Intimidate onto the Groudon again, weaken it a little bit more and give you a little bit more security against a potential rock type attack that could come out from the Groudon from Joe's side of the field. And it does look like we are going to see the Groudon.
Well, Joe going for a Dynamax as well. This is certainly the moment for Dynamax here in Game 2, and it is indeed going to be that Groudon. So really interesting to get it Dynamaxed up at this point, despite having taken the Intimidates and reduced stats, but it might be the opportunity that Joe needs just to try and deal with this Charizard. Charizard is going to go for the G-Max Wildfire, so opting for that residual damage, particularly in the sun with solar power and same type attack mode, is going to be dealing a significant chunk to that Groudon. I think it was wise from Joe to in a way, just Dynamax it to get the double HP to be able to have that longevity on the field. The Max Quake not able to pick up the KO against the Incineroar thanks to the Reflect and the reduced attack stat of the Groudon, but still dealing a very significant chunk and critically boosting up the special defense of Joe's Pokemon here in the face of the Charizard, as well as Incineroar going, do you know what, we're going to boost up our special defenses, let me reduce your special attack as well.
Yeah, it's a really nice play here from Joe, you know, not opting for that potential rock type attack that we were talking about, because you know, we discounted that there's no Lumberry or safety goggles or anything like that in the Charizard, so maybe there is a Charty Berry there. It is one of the big kind of common options to give Charizard that little bit of extra protection against those rock type threats. And you know, now Joe's boosting that special defensive stat. It's going to make him able to take the next Wildfire if that's what the Charizard chooses to throw out a lot better, especially with that parting shot now from the Incineroar on his side of the field that's just got that attack drop again. And now the Regieleki's in a great position to kind of pressure that Charizard even further.
That's the thing, Regieleki doesn't even need its Dynamax form to be able to deal a good chunk of damage to that opposing Charizard. Of course, Light Screen is up on the field though, that's something to contend with, and Regieleki going for a protect as Groudon joins the field for Eric to apply pressure to Regieleki in the next turn. Charizard goes for another G-Max Wildfire, straight into the Groudon again, just completely ignoring the Regieleki, but as you can see, the boost and the reduction is dealing a huge amount, is reducing the amount of damage. I was getting distracted by the Charty Berry reveal there, Lee, as the Max Rockfall comes out onto the Charizard. The Charty Berry really helping reduce the damage that will be dealing, and will also have an effect on that, on the weather, bringing in the sand, that residual chip damage, but critically, I think, removing the sun for that solar power ability. Yeah,
that did so little though with the Charty Berry there, reducing the damage with that light, the Reflect Up and the Intimidate kind of stacking on top of that. But taking the sun away is a huge thing because you've already weakened the Charizard with the parting shot. So taking the sun away as well, it's not going to have that solar power ability kind of boosting it any further. The Groudon's actually out on the field for Eric as well, so he's got no option to kind of bring the sun in, which is great. And the Regieleki in a good position now where it could potentially target into the Charizard, but you've got to worry about maybe even a Max Guard here and then allowing the Groudon on Eric's side of the field to get a Precipice Blades off and just remove the Regieleki, and it would be very close to the Groudon as well at the same time.
Well, that's the thing, the Groudon's managed to make it in for Eric without taking an Intimidate or a parting shot, so it should be able to easily pick up the KO obviously against Regieleki, but it's certainly putting Groudon in a difficult position here as well. Not surprised to see Regieleki leave the field in the face of the Groudon as Incineroar joins to throw down an Intimidate against this opposing Groudon, start working on it a little bit and reducing the offensive pressure that it has. I mean, there's so many different variables going on here. The Light Screen has gone down, but the Reflect is still in place, and there you go, Lee. You mentioned about the Max Guard. Charizard has indeed gone for it as Groudon goes for the Precipice Blades, avoiding the Groudon on Joe's side and activating the Sugar Berry on that Incineroar. So it is going to be able to find its mark, but you can see these berry choices that are reducing the damage of these super effective attacks have been so critical in this game.
Yeah, and they just give the Pokemon coming in these slots with those berries just a little bit like of a buff, so they're able to kind of do the job that you want them to without that worry about getting taken out so quickly in a game. And it's that longevity allowing like a Dynamax to a Pokemon to get a Gigantamax for 3 turns or Dynamax for 3 turns, or just stick around that a little bit longer, especially things like Incineroar as well that can come in on things like a Precipice Blades and then have this active fake out like we're seeing now to just slow the game down a little bit and then allow you as a player to kind of reposition and kind of get yourself into a better spot to kind of take forward in the game.
Well, we're starting to move into kind of the second phase of this game here. If you take a look at both of our trainers, neither of them have taken a KO at this point, and we're just starting to see where the turns are going to happen, where we're going to get those KOs and start getting in player Pokemon advantage. And that's where I think things are going to start steamrolling into one player's kind of momentum. Groudon is going to flinch to the fake out as the Groudon on Joe's side is going to go for the Stone Edge, finds his mark on the Grimmsnarl and will pick up a KO with the critical hit. So Joe manages to take the advantage here for Pokemon to 3. But it does give Eric again the opportunity to bring in a Pokemon from the back. As you mentioned earlier, oh, Groudon's down as well for Joe due to the G-Max Wildfire. But as you mentioned earlier, Lee, talking a little bit about kind of the weather situation here, unless the Groudon on Eric's side is able to switch out and come back in, there's no utility for Charizard to be able to get back into a sunny environment. Yeah, but it might be a bit of a double-edged sword, especially if Joe's brought the Venusaur, because you kind of, if you've got the Venusaur, you really want the sun in play to take advantage of the chlorophyll ability. Now he's lost his own Groudon, he's not got the ability to do that, so Eric might be quite happy to be sit on the field with these Groudon and just
throw out these Precipice Blades because you've got the Incineroar there, Sugar Berry's gone, it's susceptible to taking big damage from it, and now the Regieleki's come onto the field, and also another Pokemon that doesn't like those big ground attacks coming out from Groudon.
Really true, and Joe is playing very cautiously with that fourth Pokemon, has not revealed it up until this point, wanting to keep it safe and secret in the back. Charizard leaves the battlefield for Eric, being replaced by that Incineroar, really low HP, but just throwing down the Intimidate and possibly just allowing Eric to have that switch ability going into this next couple of turns. The Incineroar, however, for Joe is going to retreat as well back into his Pokeball, as Venusaur is revealed as the fourth and final Pokemon. So as you mentioned, Lee, this is going to be critical information for Eric, not wanting to accidentally set up the Sun to help that Venusaur later on in the game. And he's not going to be able to. Eric's taken has had 2 Pokemon KO'd now. Does not have the opportunity to bring Groudon out and back in to set the Sun for Charizard. It will be able to pick up the KO against Regieleki, though, evening the score. So the Joe will be down to the Incineroar and the Venusaur. Now, this is where I think, depending on how the Pokemon have been trained, is how this game 2 is going to be determined. Which ones are going to be speedier? Yeah,
this is the tricky thing, that without the Sun, the Venusaur's not really matched up to deal with the Charizard very well. Question is, does it have a Weather Ball though? Because if it does, it's got a way to hit this Charizard for super effective damage, obviously taking advantage of the Sandstorm that's currently in effect, but we've not seen that so far, so that is an interesting case. But you've also got the active Fake Out with Joe positioning his Incineroar really well. He's got that Fake Out now, he can pressure the Charizard, stop it moving a turn, potentially go for a Sleep Powder into that Groudon now, and then try his luck against that Charizard the next turn.
I like the way you think with that Weather Ball. We'll have to see. Charizard just going to go for a Protect in the face of potential Fake Out, but it's going to be the Leaf Storm coming out from that Venusaur into Groudon. Not going to be able to pick up a KO, but does deal a significant chunk of damage. Sadly, of course, going to be reducing that special attack by 2 stages as well of the Venusaur. Precipice Blades comes out from the Groudon, finds its mark on both Pokemon. Incineroar able to just hang on thanks to the Intimidate, but this Flare Blitz, with whatever damage it deals out, the recoil will be enough to pick up the KO, but it also does get the KO on the Groudon. So it is going to be Charizard versus Venusaur in this endgame situation of game 2.
Yeah, very tricky situation here, because you've got the Charizard is relying on Blast Burn. It's the most accurate of attacks. If the Venusaur can manage to get a Sleep Powder, it has got reduced special attacks. That is a long shot to pull this back, but there is a slight chance. But no, Eric's Charizard got its glasses on and able to take its target, take down the Venusaur and tie up this match.
We're going to a game 3. Phenomenal there by Charizard. I'm sure Eric was just hoping that was going to connect. No accuracy misses, please. We want to make sure that we can get this to a game 3 for all of the top 4 action. But I mean, what an incredibly close game 2 there. There was so much going on with stats being reduced, weather's being changed. And I think it was very brave by Joe to go for the Dynamax with that Groudon, despite the difficulties it was going to have to deal out some really big damage.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing for Joe in that situation was that Eric was able to utilize these screens early on in the game, and I think it made it very difficult to get the damage that he required on the Charizard, especially with the Intimidate cycling that Eric was able to do with the Incineroar. Really reduced the effectiveness of the Groudon. Essentially, you could take away the weather, yes, but you're not doing the damage to the Charizard, and you could see that in the end game it was the difference. It came in and it was able to kind of close things out. So I think again, Joe dealt with the Charizard extremely well in that game 1. Took it out of play completely. Eric didn't get any kind of chance to use it at all. Whereas that's not how kind of game 2 worked out, and that's testament to Eric and how he played that game, really identifying what he needed to do there to get the Charizard in the position to utilize it, get that G-Max Wildfire going, get the residual damage, chipping away every turn, and then having a position in the end game where he knows, I can lock this up, all I need to do is hit this one Blast Burn.
And as well, Joe kept that Venusaur for quite a late game approach in that game 2, whereas game 1 it was out a lot sooner, was able to go for those Sleep Powders in the Sun, whereas possibly having it that little bit almost too late in the match to be able to deal with any of Eric's Pokemon and put them to sleep possibly was the downfall there. So I wouldn't be surprised to see you, Joe, bringing that Venusaur again, because it is such a good Pokemon, and I think he certainly has the expertise and ability to pilot it well and adapt to what Eric is bringing, because shutting down Eric's team with those Sleep Powders was so critical to his win in game 1.
Yeah, 100%. And I think really when you look at it as well, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword if you're going for the max rockfall with the Groudon, because you are removing the Sun, which is what the Venusaur really has to rely on in this matchup in particular. So you kind of feel like, well, could we maybe rely a little bit on Regieleki to deal with the Charizard? But if you don't time it right, like if you get the timing wrong, then the Electric Train's on the field and you can't utilize your Sleep Powders as well as you would have beforehand.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And here we are, game 3. Either Joe or Eric will be one of our very first finalists here at the European International Championships. So Joe has got the Regieleki and the Incineroar out on the field, whereas Grimmsnarl and Incineroar are coming out again for Eric. Very, very similar leads we're seeing here. Yes,
same leads again from both players, feeling very comfortable about how they're approaching this particular matchup. Not wanting to take any big risks or anything like that here. And it'll be interesting to see if the Grimmsnarl on Eric's side does attempt that trick this turn to try and maybe catch the Regieleki if it doesn't switch out.
I think that could be really pivotal for Eric if you're able to reduce the speed of that Regieleki by throwing an Iron Ball in its direction. Will certainly give him such an advantage because Regieleki has just been able to go through so much of the team. Fake Out's going to come out once again from the speedier Incineroar on Eric's side into the Incineroar of Joe as Grimmsnarl goes for the light screen. So we're seeing very similar turn play out here as we did in game 2. Regieleki even going for the Thunderbolt once again, targeting down into that Grimmsnarl and just doing a significant amount of damage. They're trying to remove the Grimmsnarl as quickly as possible, but Grimmsnarl's still going to be in a position to set up those screens. It's already gone for the light screen. It has the opportunity to go for a Reflect now.
Yeah, and it probably will go for the Reflect, you know, Eric just ensuring that before this Grimmsnarl is taken down, let's get these screens up, let's give me that kind of defensive support that I need, because it worked so well in game 2. So, you know, you're going to go for it, the same sort of thing in this game as well to try and do the similar sort of thing.
Oh!
There we go. It is the trick from the Grimmsnarl.
Finally in game 3 able to find its mark, giving Regieleki the Iron Ball and getting a Magnet in return. Regieleki going to go for the Thunderbolt now. It reduced damage output as the Magnet has been snatched away. Incineroar is going to go for the Throat Chop as well into the opposing Incineroar. Just going to be able to shut down Throat Chop. I'm sorry, just being able to shut down those sounds-based moves. Oh my goodness, there's so many mechanics going on at the moment. But a really nice reveal there as well from Eric. We hadn't seen that up until this point in this set.
No, and now it pins that Incineroar onto the field. Can't use Parting Shot. It can't get, you know, Joe hasn't got the ability to cycle in and out. He has to make a hard switch now if he wants to get an Incineroar off the field, which is something that he's probably going to do this next turn. It opens the door for Eric to kind of start taking advantage of this and use Parting Shot of his own.
And something Joe was using a lot was that Parting Shot in order to reduce the attack of the Groudon or the special attack of the Charizard. So not at all surprised to see that hard switch there, bringing in the Groudon. Again, Groudon bringing the Sun, that could be great for a Venusaur hiding out in the back, and you can apply straight away that pressure with something like a Precipice Blades. Eric having a similar idea, getting in a Groudon of his very own. Regieleki going for the Electro Orb as well, obviously not going to affect Groudon, but going to be reducing the speed and doing a little bit of chip to that opposing Incineroar. But it still means that Regieleki's sitting pretty vulnerable here. Something like a Flare Blitz will be able to do a lot of damage, but instead the Parting Shot, again, showing how good this move is in this particular set, being able to reduce the attack of that Groudon, and now allows Eric the opportunity to switch in a Pokemon from the back.
Yeah, and you've got to imagine that it is going to be that Charizard coming onto the field now. Eric's positioned himself super well. He's got the Sun up on the field, and he's got the Incineroar to bring in if he needs to. He's got the Reflect. Oh, he's got the Light Screen up already. He hasn't got the Reflect up.
Just the Light Screen.
Just the Light Screen. So he needs to really rely on the Intimidate here to help his Charizard. Just, you know, he has got the Charlie Berry, so he doesn't need to worry about it too much, but you've got to really target down into that Regieleki slot. He knows there's no Focus Sash there, so he can target into that slot to, you know, pick up a knockout and get rid of that one threat and start the kind of momentum swing, especially with the G-Max Wildfire.
Well, the Groudon's going to retreat for Joe. A lot of switching going on in the set, particularly in this game 3, as Incineroar dives in here, going to be able to throw that Intimidate down onto the opposing Groudon here. Of course, Charizard really not going to worry about that, but I think it's good for Joe to have the utility to go for a Fake Out. Again, if you're Groudon, you're opposite of Regieleki and Incineroar, you might think that it's quite a nice time you're having, but not if those Intimidates and Parting Shots keep coming off from the opposing Incineroar. But for Eric, it is going to be the Gigantamax Charizard into the fray, and it's in such a strong position here to go for something like a G-Max Wildfire into the Regieleki, just remove it from the field, and obviously get that residual damage playing up as well. Joe also is Dynamaxing.
And it's going to be the Regieleki, Lou.
Oh, you know I love to see it. Seeing that Regieleki, so happy and delighted to be here. But again, such a great challenge to that Charizard. Something like a Max Lightning is going to be destructive.
Yeah, it will be. It's the question of will it be able to take the attack from the Charizard. That is the big question, Lou.
Well, let's see how the turn plays out. Charizard does go for the G-Max Wildfire into the Regieleki. How much is it going to do? It picks up the one-hit KO and removes it from the battlefield with a critical hit. Oh my goodness, Lee.
I don't know if the critical hit really matters there, but that is a huge turn for Eric, really paying off with that trick that he got on to the Regieleki. You know, we talked about, you know, he's only got the light screen up. He didn't go for the reflect, but he picked the perfect time to catch that Regieleki out and execute this game plan. Getting the Precipice Blades now onto the Incineroar switch in and getting some nice residual damage. This Charizard is in a fantastic position. Obviously, with the Sun Up, though, if the Venusaur is in the back for Joe, he does have to be a little bit careful because there is that Sleep Powder threat still waiting in the wings that Joe could utilize.
And there is the Venusaur, very happy to be out in the sun, but you are 100% right, Lee. That Iron Ball really paying off for Eric there, being able to remove the Regieleki. But Charizard definitely still has an issue in the face of this Venusaur, and Groudon, you know, able to deal some damage to that Incineroar, but Venusaur again can apply pressure to the Groudon going forward. I don't think Groudon can necessarily, unless it wants to reveal out a Fire-type move in this situation, isn't going to be able to deal too much to the Venusaur.
No, not at all. And I think you've got the fake out here from the Incineroar that you can kind of slow down the Groudon here and go for the Sleep Powder into the Charizard, and then maybe you have to try and rely, if you are John, maybe maxing your Venusaur. It's not ideal, but the other option is maxing your own Groudon. Really, you need to get that on the field and be able to try and get rid of the Charizard if you are able to.
Oh! Groudon diving out of the way of the Sleep Powder. Venusaur going to fall victim to the G-Max Wildfire here. Eric, oh my goodness, doing so well with these solid KOs from the Charizard. Obviously, Venusaur able to hang on at this point, but at the end of the turn, the residual damage will be able to remove it from the field if Groudon doesn't get there first, and it gets a double KO. The offensive pressure from Eric in these last couple of turns has been amazing. We see the handshake from the players. I think Joe knows that it is curtains at this stage. Charizard is the victor against Venusaur in that debate.
Yeah, and you would always expect that that would be the outcome, but I mean, that is the risk with the Sleep Powder. We talked about it, it isn't 100% accurate, it can miss, and if it does miss, the risk in that situation is so detrimental, and unfortunately here for Joe, it has cost him. Eric playing this Charizard phenomenally well, and like I say, with that trick, just changed the game and opened the door for the Charizard, and what a nice scene between both players here as you see them